be here today and tomorrow. We're making extraordinarily good progress. Why are you shaking your head, Ken?
Yeah.
So I just want to know how people feel about working today, get this done, and not needing to do tomorrow.
I'm in favour of that.
We still go to the party after.
You absolutely can go. The party can get started early if you want to.
Well, they were into that.
There has been a suggestion from on the left of me that 2 o'clock.
Guess what, I'm driving tonight, just if anyone needs a ride, I'm driving.
Glenn, I think that would be great, but I think the process that we're going through is absolutely the most important. I think it's been really good, the process been through, and I wouldn't want to artificially try and accelerate.
Here.
Councillor Rebel has stolen my speech, which was the next bit. So we do not to shortchange process. We want to do what. But look, let's see how we go. But it is an option. We can get progress and get things through today. Have an option. I'll have to do tomorrow. All right. So
Right, first item is Torpilla Valley Road, and Bruce is going to just give us an update on a little bit of its history and what is proposed. In the report, there is mention on page 18 in terms of the submissions received, and in the CapEx pages 37, 43, and 44, just because it's split over in the group activities. Over to Bruce.
So it's going to be a very abridged version because obviously this project has been around for a long time, several decades, and obviously the council has been trying to move forwards for teams, for housing, you know, a key area of development, a lot of into development areas. This is can connect onto our networks, you know, obviously they run past the bottom of the road down the state highway. So that's obviously what the project's all about, releasing some, or kind of stimulating some land, getting development happening. And when development happens, they pay development contributions, which then goes back in to pay off the costs, you know, of work. So we had, there's quite a lot in there, 5 point something, I think, again, 5.8. They've been doing stuff. We've obviously did the section upgrade. There's a few bits and pieces that have happened. The team have been working hard on the land acquisition. So as you go up the road, there's a lot of sections come right down the road, needs to be widened to facilitate further development. So that necessitates purchasing bits of land from landowners, just living slivers. So they've been working away on that. So obviously in the proposed CapEx program, we went really hard and zeroed it out. Back on the board now for consideration to come back in. My advice would be to bring it back in at a very minimal level, just to keep it moving. So don't try and do what we initially might have been trying to do, which was a whole lot of work around designs and then construction. Would be bring in say 500,000, and you'd split that 450 from roading. That will enable you to continue on with the progress we've already made around the land purchases, and then also 50k for stormwater to kind of advance the designs and stuff for stormwater, so giving the total of 500. So I think basically that still defers the project out to the LTP, but enables us to keep a little bit of momentum. You put a couple of those things to bed, so land purchases, as everyone's aware, all you need is the land owners to change, and something you start all over again. So there's some benefits of giving those. So that would be my proposal, BH version 2.0.
Bruce, a couple of questions, if I may. In terms of property purchases and their impact on CapEx, where do they sit in the numbers?
So it is CapEx under the road because it's a cost to actually do the road. We're going to build a bigger road, wider road. As part of the cost to do that, we need to purchase that land. So it's a capital cost.
It's a straight. And the other question is,
sorry to interrupt. The funding community road, it's not under district road. So it's
so the other question is, if you describe process that's already underway and you've got negotiations going on and the phase, is there a goodwill element in there if you stop, pull the plug and go backwards? Is that an issue?
There's definitely some reputational risk in there. You know, if you suddenly go, okay, we've all got to this point and now, sorry, we've deferred for a year and we're not going to carry on, see you in 12 months' time. You know, there's definitely a reputational risk there.
And the third part of the question, if I may, is around the status of property developers who might already be involved and engaged in this process to provide that subdivision, the housing. So what's the status there? What stage are they at in their process and what is the risk of interrupting that process?
Yeah, I don't know in any really great level of detail that I can share with you exactly where they're at in their processes, but what I know is that the signals are right, and I've been hearing the signals are right. And obviously, if we're maintaining some momentum and keeping things moving forwards, that in turn sends a signal from us as council that this is something we are going to keep going with. We've had to take a hard call and make a minor deferral, but we're still kind of moving forwards in this direction. So that hopefully maintains some of that confidence to move forwards. Whereas if we do go for a full stop, then again, you know, there is a risk of some loss of confidence and with those potential developers.
Well, I mean, probably an unfair question for you. Are they out on a limb and exposed in terms of the development process, and we could be impacting that process? And again, I'm probably on a fair question.
So my answer to that, I wouldn't have thought so. I mean, council always reserves the right to change its plans and make changes to what the annual plan process would be. So, you know, if you were a developer and you had everything reviewed, ideally you'd submit to the annual plan and say, make sure you don't touch this project because everything on the line is that would be the process to kind of engage, I would say, with council around that to make sure council's got a clear understanding of your position, your objectives. I don't know if we get that or not through the annual plan process.
Developers normally submit to the annual plan.
Yeah, they do. Sometimes they do. I mean, not always, obviously, like everyone's different, but yeah, everyone's there.
So I guess what I'm thinking is that if we're going to provide housing, it's always going to be a partnership between council and the private developers involved with whoever's involved. So it's that partnership that there's a degree of helping each other and trust involvement to get the end result, which is housing. So that's all I'm concerned about, that we're cognizant of the decision-making process that we go through and the effect that it has on that bigger picture. So if you've proposed that we look at 500K back in.
Yeah.
Are we geared up to have a look at those numbers and see what the effect that we have? And the same for all the other items on that list. Are we able to plug those numbers in and come back to council?
We can give you really give you the rating impact for that individual addition, but not as a percentage of the rates increase as quickly.
Yeah, we can give an indicative number to that. Just to give off and then that's it.
Like improvement.
We split different parts, we different ages, but say age.
Yeah.
Yes, an
average would be $3.66 or $17,500. So that actual project is actually being DC funded.
Yeah.
So it'll be just the depreciation component that we start paying.
So that's locally funded for the Tuesday.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then there'll be a separate item for the 50,000 for wastewater. Oh, it's water, sorry.
As CapEx items. So as CapEx items, those have been fairly small.
Yeah, $3.66
per tens rate cut.
Peter,
If we were to do that and agree on that, how does that impact on your ability to deliver on the priority projects? By
Yep, good question. It doesn't impact on us too negatively because the land purchase is a large majority of that money. So that money that all the, I think it's $450 for roading, a large portion of that is land purchase. So it's all work been done with surveyors, valuers, builders, and all that stuff. It's basically about paying out the money to the landowners. So it's not a large project management. And it's that. And you've got 50,000 around the stormwater, which isn't huge as well. So I'm confident of ongoing the project management.
okay, so it wouldn't, adding it back in wouldn't detract from our general purpose of ensuring that.
Families.
Thank you. So at the moment, the impact on the proposed 11.5% rates increase or of adding in another 500K to total percentage would be negligible. $3.06 per 10. I got that right. How much?
$4.94
So $4.
and 11 cents. I see.
30 years.
Should we decide quickly before it goes into him?
I think we agree with you.
Oh, 30, sorry.
30 years.
$3.
Yeah, 329 is the second.
Let's go down these.
Oh, no.
Yeah.
Oh,
That-
Okay.
do we need to do a process where we check back against sort of the submissions of this? With one person submit in support and one person raise concerns around risks. You've got two people of all of the people that came back in the consultation process that talked about this. So, I mean, does that touch a point that we need to have in this conversation?
Right? And, but of course, there's been, these other community views known as well, why submitters to this process, there's certainly had submitters to previous processes, and there's been quite a, over the years, different engagement with property owners in the area. So I think that understanding the community views of this topic decision is a bit broader than just the submission to this process. I can speak to what they actually are. What else can you?
I believe the submitter that was in support of it was the Thames Community Board, and one of the submitters that was opposed to it was the Whangamata Community Board.
Oh, right.
So
Sorry, which one?
Whangamata Community Board, I think, submitted against it, if I recall correctly. I haven't got the submission in front of me. And just returning to Whangamata, actually, Gary said something earlier about selling the story, what we're benefiting from, and which I really liked. And I think it's something to really keep in mind. This is the only opportunity in this annual plan to promote what is one of the biggest issues in Thames. We hear it all the time. I went to a meeting with Te Whatu Ora about the locality descriptions for Te Whatu Ora in this locality. And the biggest thing that came up from Thames is lack of housing. It was quite the big election issue, lack of housing. The hospital is struggling to find staff because of a lack of housing. This is the only opportunity in our plan to progress something that is really, really important for ratepayers. It will benefit the entire district because this is the hospital. We are the area hospital. This is where you come to get your leg broken. No, they don't break legs, they fix them. And Thames is bearing the brunt of the rating for this continuation, and we're happy to do so. We have the full backing of our board on this.
Sorry. Speaking on that, so I think we talk about submitters, that's part of the picture. The other part of the picture is highlighted in terms of the risks of put the brakes on completely. I guess the only question that I would throw back, given that that is the impact on rates of the 500,000, what would the appetite be for going higher?
Sure.
And I'm looking at the team's perspectives here because that 7 cents a year for district ratepayers, I think that's probably, we can look at that, but the Thames one, what would the appetite be for going higher than 500,000? And would there be any benefit in having that discussion?
From a starting perspective, I'll probably leave it at 500. And if things are going, again, things are going really well, come back at that time and talk to council. That would be my, because of the mode we're operating at the moment, I think that would be the way you do it based on everything we've talked about this morning. I think the more prudent way would be to hold it as that, progress that. If things go really well, we come back and talk to council at that time.
Thank you, Bruce. Okay. So we've got a couple of options here. We can go through line by line on these items, which is probably the sensible thing to do. Or we can go through, discuss each one and come back. My feeling is because it's fresh, we should go through line by line. And while we can't do it as a vote on the resolution specifically, or can we put in resolutions on each individual?
For the chair, we would feel comfortable if we just, if we can do it all in. Yeah.
From a staffing perspective, I think if we make an informal decision on each one, at the end, it should go back and look at the cumulative impact.
Yeah.
And I'll just ask Bruce to think about what if all of those are in, what does that mean? Team, and then have to call it.
Okay, so let's keep working through. We've got some perspective on that one. Whangamata.
Who wants to? John will speak.
We want to speak.
I'd rather hear from the team if that's all right, please, and then we'll have a discussion as councillors.
Okay, so NIP Curve, NIP Curve has been a program of works in Whangamata for a number of years.
2014.
There we go, 2014. From my perspective as a GM, the objective of the project initially was around aesthetics. And so you have to step back and really understand how this came about. So the way Whangamata actually developed was unsealed roads initially, then they sealed roads. Stormwater was generally always soakage, and so they had swales each side of the road. The road was often the high spot, and then you had swales on each side. So when they sealed those roads, they, majority of areas, you want the water to run off and go to the swales to soak away. So you don't have curve and channel. So they just stayed sealed. And what you do end up with over time is you end up with edge break, which is the edges of the seal break off as cars drive off, and because they always go park, especially boat cars with boat trailers and stuff. They like park outside where they drive off and seal onto the grass berm or swale and park, and that breaks off the edge, and it can get quite messy over time. You know, the grass growing over the edge, and it's a bit messy. So this is my recollection. Trying to go back to 2014 was that the initial focus was on let's actually tidy these areas up.
Widen the road and put those edges on.
Yeah, just make them look a bit better. Wide, bit of widenings. You don't put a curve and channel because you want more to get off the road. So you do like a nib curve. So a nib curve's like this high, like 20 kilometres high. Same width as a curve, very low. That means cars can just drive over it to park on the berm and stuff, and the water can, fill up a little bit and then flow across. So that's really what that project is about. We picked up a number of roads over those years. We have had some issues in some roads where as a result of doing the nib curve, we've had to actually, because we're in that area, we've had to actually go and do some stormwater upgrades at the same time, which has increased the cost of some of those work over the years. So yes, it kind of varies in different sites as to whether you need to do stormwater or whether you don't need to do stormwater. And the other thing I'd say is that customer perceptions and customer expectations have obviously changed a lot. Whangamata was a little kind of batch town where everyone was happy with all that kind of stuff. So now we have higher expectations for what our roads and curves and stuff looks like.
Terry, I'm going to ask you to talk to that in a second, but before, if I could just get more of a picture of, what I want to know, Bruce, is the wider impact on the stormwater infrastructure for Whangamata and how what you've talked about with the fits in with that wider discussion that we've had around Whangamata's got issues, stormwater, how does it should fit together?
So how the two fit together is that if you're going to go and dig up the swale and widen the road and lay a nib curb, you'll usually take an opportunity to go, do we need to put some infrastructure in here, or is there infrastructure in which isn't actually taken up? And so at that time, you might put soakage cells in, which helps soak away more water from the swales. The other thing to go back in history a little bit is the swales back in the day, and you talk to anyone who's been there for some of these old news through Whangamata, they talk about when they were unsealed, you know, the county grader would come down and rip the swales out once a year type of thing, you know, just to get the grass, turn them over to get good soakage. Because obviously what happens over time is you get build up of grass, you get a bit of material that then kind of seals off the surface and does the soak so well. So now, strangely enough, people aren't that excited about a grader coming down their berm and ripping out. So now we install soakage in those areas where you have to go and put like a catch girder or a scruffy dome or something to get some water in, and then soakage cells or pipes underneath. So that's kind of how it works, and that, you know, you can't go in and do a whole lot of work in one area without actually trying to do a more complete job.
So nib curb, the project was progressed. It has wider impacts on all these other things. Are they, Terry, are they separated out in the minds of your constituents? Are they fencing just these projects?
No, it was very much an idea around when we sat down and looked at the town, was mostly like Bruce has explained to you, soakage. So the areas where people wanted to put footpaths, we didn't want to put footpaths there because the soakage was taken up, because so much infill housing with driveways and roofs was taking up that area for soakage. So that berm was like quite big berm, so people can park their cars and boats on them. They were quite big. So in doing that, what we did was you won't have a footpath where you've got nib curb, and it'll only be in the areas where we've got good soakage. So down around the golf course and the areas around there, we put some curb and channeling in there. We thought about doing it across town, but what it showed us with the curb and channeling is that the water runs along the road, all right, but when it gets to the end without any pipes, it was flooding each end of the street. So we were having issues over that, which we still have. So the nib curb is only put in the areas where the ground is higher than low areas of town, and where the soakage areas in the road are maintained. So it's part of the, like he says, it started off as a program to try and fix the width of the road and took out the swale issues, particularly like that. But it's turned into more, we put soakage pits down below the road and the area road to try and control the water, because we haven't got pipe infrastructure to take the water away. So it's a balance of getting those two things right. So that's what we're trying to maintain that. And it's locally funded by locals, like the whole project. And it's been going since 2014, and we've done a lot of streets. Yeah, so there's still a few to go, but we're on the right track. But now with the stormwater project coming in, we can now look at those areas which are really giving us a lot of issues with trouble with soakage, maybe put pipes systems or look at other sort of.
So this is, and I guess what worries me about Whangamata, this is not just about nib curb, this is about wider stormwater infrastructure. And when you step into that wider Whangamata into the water stormwater infrastructure, you step into territory where we know the water table is low. We know that there's a whole lot of other infrastructure work right across Whangamata that needs to be addressed. And I'm just looking at my own head about how they fit together. And what I wouldn't want to see is council doing nib curb part of the solution, and we can't finish the project in a way that doesn't interest the public. Repeat the question.
It really just builds on what you're saying, this Whangamata stormwater improvements, there's 1.1's just in there, and is there a crossover in these two projects, or are they completely separate, or doing one will fix the other? That's my question.
From my perspective, they are quite separate, because way that the curve came about was the aesthetics. So it hasn't been like my team, my water services team going, let's look at Whangatana, where's the worst storm areas, let's go and do the curve in these areas. That's not how the selection of the areas has been selected. There might be some areas, local knowledge, that Terry would probably talk about his knowledge, and others on the board that would say these are areas, but principally it's been working with the board, identifying where are the priority areas to do those nip curve works. The big stormwater works that we talked about, that's the much bigger project that we're working with the board and the community working group on looking at all of Whangatana. We've done a lot of work in the past. It's now picking that up, reinvigorating it, updating it with the latest climate data, and then looking at what infrastructure we need to install over Whangatana. So they sound similar, but they're kind of disconnected.
Thanks, Bruce. Any other comments?
Yes, I just had a query. One of the submitters had said that nib curb construction is to be retained and used for the maintenance rate of the stormwater system, but that's not really currently possible within this annual plan, is it? Because it's a different project and we're not putting,
It's not maintenance.
or is it?
It's definitely not maintenance. And I guess my customers might not understand the depreciation. It's definitely not maintenance. And I wouldn't really call it much of an upgrade to the stormwater system. You might end up doing some stuff, obviously, because you're in there at that time. But that's not the main driver.
I think just to add to it, I think the key around this is we didn't want to put footpaths along the berms in areas where there was good soakage. So it started about that. So we actually did around Beverly Terrace, we went down and we asked all the people in the street, do you want a footpath or do you want to keep your berms? Because we want to keep them. So it came back, they wanted to keep their berms. And we felt that that was a key part of the soakage because the lack of soakage that was happening around the town with infill housing. So we felt there was another way of trying to protect the town area from the issues that we've currently got, and then in the low part of town, the water tables come above the town.
Yeah.
So while it's, Bruce, is what he's saying is right, it's not part of the bigger network part of it. It does fit where we're not putting pipes, a soakage system that currently keeps a wide berm available for soakage.
It doesn't compromise the stormwater soakage the way you do it. The other thing I remember is that being a beach holiday town with lots of, often properties that have been subdivided, you get a lot of cars and a lot of boats that want to park on those wide areas. And so the last thing you need is a footpath, because then they're like parking all over your footpath. So people are like, don't put a footpath here. I like all my friends who come in summer and park on this bit of grass.
Problem.
So 685,000 doesn't sound like a lot of money. I can't believe I just said that. But how many roads, like what sort of area would that actually put nib curbing in? Like one road, two roads? Or
We did 5 streets in 2014. We do 1 street now.
that does not
That's the price,
the answer to my question. No, but it's for the same price, you mean?
the same price.
Oh, okay, thank you. Yeah.
Can we do the same exercise, please? The social development and numbers up there.
What we
$4.27.
Totally.
And this is rated locally.
$23,981.
And district. No.
No, it's just
And what was the total?
23,981.
Okay. If there's no further questions, what I'd like to suggest is we move on and we cover all of these, and then we take a broad picture of what we're looking at here. And then the last thing that we'll need to do is whatever we're looking at, look at the capacity and have a discussion with Alan about what that is likely to have in terms of implications for delivery. Okay, wastewater extension.
Can you speak to that,
I'll
please?
speak. So obviously, for anyone that's not aware, it is only serviced about a third of the town is serviced by council water supply or wastewater. And they're a little bit not quite exactly the same, they're different. And that's just the way it kind of has developed over time. All the other properties are on their wastewater, for constructing wastewater on septic tanks. there might be a couple of properties where they're subdivided, they've got one system for 3 or 4 houses, but most of them fall on individual septic tanks. There's definitely a desire by a number of properties in that area to be fully serviced, which obviously you understand. It's easy to flush your toilet, you don't have to worry about it, basically. You don't get, go out and clean it out every 3 years, you don't have any issues, all that kind of stuff. So we understand that. There are some areas of Hahei that, as with a lot of areas, aren't ideally suited to septic tanks. And so you get areas on the hill where it's can be quite silty and clayey. That's not really ideal for septic tank disposal. It can cause instability. The other areas that aren't ideal is on banks of like, down on the flats where it is sandy, on the banks of like rivers. So the Wickmore stream is one area where that stream can get can experience some pollution over summer. Now, it's definitely not all septic tanks. There's agricultural land upstream, farmland upstream, which causes issues. Our wastewater plant discharges into there, but we did some upgrades a number of years ago, so the quality from the wastewater plant is really good. So that's not an issue. So you've got some stuff, not drinkable, don't drink it.
Not that one.
Some farming activity influence, and then there's a number of septic tanks on the lower reaches, which are right on the banks, and that's just how they used to do things. So, the regional council are often working in catchment to try and improve things. And one way that you could improve it further is by reticulating those properties that are run on the edges of that Wickmore stream. So that's really what it's about. There is another stream at the northern end of the beach, which historically we haven't really had too many issues, but we've got 1 or 2 property owners that are quite keen to get serviced that area. And often you'll start feeling and getting the pressure when their septic tanks are getting to the end of life, and they're thinking, I don't want to have to go and upgrade septic tank. If council's going to come and reticulate 5 years later, or I don't want to upgrade at all. I'd rather council just took it off my hands and put it in reticulation. So there is a little bit of pressure there, but the main issue is Wickmore Street.
Just sort of reading the comments from the submitters, has there been community engagement around this?
There's been a bit. We definitely have to have more moving ahead in this direction, but there has been some engagement. Did you want to?
Yeah, I've actually got the Hahei ratepayer submission in front of me. So they're disappointed about the water because of the 50% of their population has certain potable water. But there's a bigger story to the Hahei water supplies, some private ownership, public ownership. It's a bit of a bun fight. PCDC is not working with us on the proposed Hahei sewage expansion, and they did complete the sewage feasibility study for Hahei, which confirmed available capacity at the Hahei waste treatment plant, the expectation of the community and approximately 70 affected parties was that funding was allocated in 2023-24. Wigmore's stream pollution concerns have been raised many times by our members in the committee during the past 10 years. I also want to point out in support of Hahei ratepayers is that stream feeds into a very significant marine reserve environment, and with our district hats on, it's one of our jewels in our crown. And if the entire amount of 315,624 wasn't to be included, I think it would show a lot of goodwill to have a sum included that pushes us along so it's potentially shovel ready, if that makes sense.
So just feeding into the marine reserve, what's the mix, you might know, what's the mix between contamination from the wastewater and potential contamination from the WRC controlled areas? Because you mentioned that. It's
very hard to. That's something I don't have an answer for that. I think it's very tricky themselves. And I would say that, there are issues in that area with the septic tanks. We're aware of that, and it will be a good thing to resolve that. And I think council was aligned to kind of advance, as Councillor Cole said, get things to shovel ready. We could look at that. It's not ideal, but I will also say it's not quite the catastrophe that a lot of people might actually expect it is. And once you actually understand and work and feel, you understand about the pollution factors and when things get out to the sea and what happens to seawater and all the rest of it. Not saying we leave it as it is forever, definitely not like this. It's a pretty fast time. It's not quite, the rain event is going to end next week. And I know you're not saying that. I know you're not saying that. But I'm just saying that as far as context, it's something that we felt we could defer for a year, but again, happy to.
I suppose the other point with Wigmore is that children play in that stream. There's multiple WRC is actually working on that as well. I just think it's something that has been pushing for a while.
Yeah.
If we could get that planning and that investigation done would be.
Yeah, we've got a couple of doctors live nearby, don't they? And they're testing the water regularly and seeing the results.
Had some not very good results.
Lance?
Just to make, this is budget to scope and provide costing for it.
Start to get designs going. So
it's design.
Three-year program. There's funding in the LTP across 3 years. You were advised to include anything in there. I'd look at a reduced figure of that, just to at least keep things moving again. We've got hard calls, but if we were going to do something, look at a reduced figure, keep things moving, keep trying to progress things from a design perspective, get things closer to be ready to go.
Bruce, what if locals were connected and there is a connection fee for that? How does that impact the numbers? So this is just design and scoping, isn't it? So that the connection fees wouldn't have any impact on that.
Not yet. That's still not till you've done full 3 year expenditure. Obviously, then you would have, as we mentioned before, I think, there'd be an infrastructure charge and a development contributions charge for each property and a whole process that we have to go through around that consultation.
Brenda, did you have a question?
No, and it was really about, do we have an idea of the scope and the size, but it's not, don't. No, but we know it's 70 odd properties.
Something.
So we're talking about a big piece of kit.
It's
And a
full
big,
price.
well, but we're talking about a lot of infrastructure.
Yeah, so I think we had 2.8 million roughly.
Yeah.
Across 3 years.
So have put the additional capacity.
Yeah.
We did, how much, are we more than flush with?
Yeah, no, we're good. We did the number of upgrades over the years. We've got a membrane filtration unit that we installed at that wastewater treatment plant. We've upgraded that over once or twice over its lifetime. The system works very well, touch wood. It's very good. It's dealt with a lot of criticism we used to face around our wastewater plant, and that's all the wastewater plant's fault. Wasn't. But we were having an impact and we're now having much less of an impact.
Comment, I've just pulled up the water quality document from the Waikato Regional Council website. And they did some microbial source tracking. So that means you can test the microbes and work out where it tracks back to. So the finding is the most commonly detected source of people contamination was from ruminant animals. And it goes on to talk about possums, gulls, not dogs, and some other comments in there. So
So the septic tanks are not showing up as having a impact on that spread.
According to this report, it's most commonly detected ruminant animals. So that means, and presumably the septic tanks will be a contributor to the load, but simply by removing the septic tanks, you've still got the problem.
And it also depends whether you're tested after a rain event as well. So if it has stormwater intrusion into the septics, it will be higher. To dilute my argument.
I like this race. So are we at a stage where we can do an analysis on that? Peter?
And Bruce, do you have you had a recommendation around Topra Valley about what could be done to keep things moving? Do you have a?
I do. 150,000, I think, would get us pretty close around the design. So I think if we were going to look at something, I wouldn't go back to the 316 or whatever it was. I'd go 150.
And what would those numbers look like? It's 150.
Putting on fence, over the ratepayer of $5,250.
And that's also
For district is.
I think it would go a long way to the Harvey. Really good and valued.
I've heard some of that feedback as well from the Hahei folks. They are concerned about it, so I share your concern. Any more questions on Hahei? Okay, sorry,
Are we going to come back and talk about staff capacity
we'll do that
at the end?
at the end,
Yeah.
if that's all right. So I'll ask Aileen and Bruce and the team to have some input once we've got an overview of the picture there.
Final item from our river trail was OPEX. So I wonder if we wrap up this CapEx discussion and have a discussion around staff capacity, and then we can go back to it.
Chris, could you just rip up the phone one? It's not funny.
Is that freaking?
Not funny.
There was no security guard on there. Was for
What?
John.
I wasn't even on it.
It was for John.
It's a joke.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Very poor joke.
Oh, ha, councillor Morrissey.
All right.
All right, so I'm going to ask Aileen to.
I'm going to refer to.
All right.
Because I know it's free from the same thing as one.
So it's a little bit different. It's actually not, not as bad as what it might have been, which is good. It's a good place. So Porthera Valley, a large part of that, as we talked about, is land features. So that actually is basically, it's already there. We've already got 60 to 70% of the landowners have come back and see, yep, this is good. So that's basically, a large part of that is basically done. And it's a bit of stormwater stuff, so there'll be a little bit more stormwater work, probably for project engineer, the project delivery plan. That historically has been delivered by the roading engineers in the roading team, so not in the project team. That so far has worked out.
Yeah, okay, contract, the local contract.
So it's not too bad, so okay, it's not doubling up too much on project. So this one here, Hahei wastewater extension, a little bit of project time, but mostly time with the Three Waters team, because it's at that kind of early stage, looking at designs and stuff before you then kind of hand it over to a project delivery manager. So I think my feeling is it's manageable, because it's not all, this is project delivery, this is project delivery, this is project delivery. It's spread across a number of teams, all within project delivery structure, obviously, but I think it's doable. Don't go back to Carol.
Not at the moment. I believe Bruce sticks to the cap.
But that would be my estimation.
So if we can crunch the numbers and correct me if I'm wrong, but based on the $17 million of CapEx, which contributes 1% of rates increase, looking at those numbers, I would hazard a guess that we would go from 11.57 to about 11.59. Am I in the ballpark? 11.63.
Yeah.
So we've gone, if we adopt those three as per the staff recommendation, we've gone from 11.57 to 11.63% base increase. So the question for us as a council, can we live with that? Yes.
What did you discuss?
Oh, you asked if we could, that increase, and I said, yes, I can.
So let's get a feeling around the room, please. We're comfortable with going with those recommendations.
I think we've all done very, very well. I think that one of those stuff in there is something that I would totally support, over the Valley one. I see Parliament as something that doesn't occur. It's not going to stop the world spinning. And I don't see those two projects as instance there. I support Totara Valley, but I know the difference is insignificant, but it is still a difference in the upward trend. We're all sort of peaking out. I didn't put anything up on that list because I didn't want to, didn't want to I've got a project that I would love to head up there, which I believe would benefit Coromandel immensely, but I will live without it. It's $500,000 that I walked away from. And I just think, yeah, I am just having one, a must for this town, 10. The other two, they're not my pet projects. I let it slide, and I think those should slide too.
Robin, did you have anything to add? Happy with your.
For the two things that Thames Ratepayer would have to pay for, because of course we wouldn't be paying for anything in Whangamata, for that particular project in Whangamata. For Totara Valley, I think, and the 21 cents for Hahe easily done.
Just concur with my fellow colleague there. I think for the benefit and the what we're sending out to the community to say, hey, we're listening to your concerns and things that have been promised for a long time. I think probably all three of those have been promised for a long time. And just to be able to say, hey, we're doing some of those promised for a long time stuff.
Yep.
So
Agreed.
I'd support all three.
Thank you. Dylan?
I'd support all three for exactly the reasons that Martin just gave, and I think they're cross-district, the impact is minimal, while I respect what John Morrissey's saying about not changing things. I think we have to, we go through a consultation process and then don't change anything. Not that we should for the sake of it, but in those three instances, I think, I would support all three.
Thank you. I'm going to come to Gary in a little now. Gary, now Gary, I'm not sure if you can see those numbers, and you probably can't see the whiteboard. Are you clear on the numbers that we're talking about here, Gary? Oh, he's not back. Okay. Right.
He was phone to message.
Okay, thank you. All right, we'll go to John.
But my natural inclination is to say that we should be trying to save every single cent that we can. But I'm also very aware of the feelings in Hahe, and it would be certainly a good signal to them that it's not off the table. And for that reason, I support it, and I support the other ones on the basis can't single one out and not the other. It's the same logic that applies. So,
thank you, Peter.
So I agree with what John was saying, but I would add the comment that accepting that we're not at 7.7, if we're going to be at 11.57 or 11.63 or 11.78 or 11.31, it's the same sales job. It's the same message. Sorry, let's put it. It's the same message that we need to be taking out to the community, whether it's 11.3 or whether it's 11.7. So, and that I think is a really is an important thing. Is what that message looks like. That was part of what I was saying before. But yeah,
Rico?
Yeah, I can absolutely support all three and all of what they say.
Terry?
Yes, and I'm very happy with the three, and thank you very much for the consideration. If it was necessary, I would scrub it off the board if you felt uncomfortable about it, but if you feel comfortable with the 6-3, then thank you very much.
So I'm going to add my tuppence to it, and I think that in those three projects there, the difference in dollars or percentage is minor in the grand scheme of things, but the value in what we're contributing back to our communities is way beyond the dollars that are involved here. The message that we're sending back is that we are here to deliver benefits and services, and we have heard you, and we're here working for you. We are constrained, but we've heard you, and we want to deliver these projects for you. And on a district-wide basis, I get to talk to folks right across the district on a regular basis. These three are important. and I secure all three. So where it sits at the moment is that, I think we've got strong enough to support, no disrespect. to
That's fine, I'm used to getting beaten up.
Do you want us to revisit your project? Or are you happy to hold it over for 12 months and we?
I came here today with the attitude that, we're going to use it for our rate payers. By that, I mean by the rates that we're paying. And I see Coronado's, not the highest, rate increase, like towards, it's getting up there. I think they've got enough pain, I want to load it. Thank you, that's the option. Thanks.
Everyone?
So this is the CapEx discussion. With the military, I just want to be clear in terms of the wording of the resolution that we are covering off what we've got in there for the CapEx. And then we're looking at the river trail at a separate company. So
I need to check and just make sure that, because I've separated out Whakara Valley. In particular, the district fundamental and local.
Sorry, it is. Item here is 450, and you want a separate item of 50,000 for storm. Oh, sorry, you put it in.
Wait a minute, wait, sorry, say that again.
That's the first one, that's 500,000,
Okay,
should be 450, please.
anything else?
No, was this local, that's local rate impact?
And he's going to go back and.
Yeah.
Um.
Sorry, I missed what you said, Karen.
Karen suggesting a new title to this.
Thank you.
We do that, it would be as per what's attached to the report. I think it's fine as it is.
And Curtis, otherwise adjusting it to the addition to the.
We could have it, noting it, this brings out the program up to you guys.
Harry's back. So
Peters. Hammond presented, yeah.
So this was
So like on the A,
even in the.
no, 450 an hour
From conservation.
to enable continued progress on the project rather than specifically saying it's made of continued progress on the project.
yeah, agreed.
Praise to worship.
Giving it all sides.
Really monitored.
Sorry, what was that?
So
So what's for A? Who change rather than continue progress for land acquisition and progress for this project?
Yeah.
Anybody else can't. This is good.
And 2 things. So we've got a land acquisition against.
And can this be the same amendment?
I'm just a bit. Nervous about it.
And so we still, it's not reintroducing.
That was a
We're looking in the possible possible staging of a stock. Yes, with the water. But it's not everything. It's really unsafe because some of the.
On this one, it's this.
This kind of ultimate law. And yeah, we can go into such a combination. That,
And this one and this one.
but we want.
Easy.
Thank you. Did you want planning in line?
Harry just wants land acquisition on everything.
The queen of land acquisition.
She's really out of acquisition. Use it.
Yes, it's been in.
$890 million.
No.
Yes.
Jelly.
Tomorrow. Oh, here it is.
Oh, Newcastle.
Billions.
$1 billion.
Good.
Fund budget, big rebuild.
They say
It's got $890 million.
we should take this.
And the roll at mill to repair roads. Huge funding package for the $890 million. So they're talking $1 billion.
But we're not, we've got to be.
Is this signature budget? Is it?
Human or.
Big drop. Is it the premium? I came through like a desert. After the last week.
I think so.
General weapon down. That's right.
And is there more money?
And it was a big one.
So there's that will include the far rates for councils that need to rebuild. But I'm assuming there'll be extra. 890 million won't go to road. And how can we get ahead from that? Oh, so that's been, yeah, right.
History.
Yeah, that's what I wanted to ask, because 450K, that was sort of thinking around, solid waste detour. Things like that. Could be able to lump some of that back towards. Yeah. Come on, is the relationship.
The whole building.
I think that's going to be pretty much it. With a view to approving the last resolution, we're going to start to go away and take this final.
into that plan.
Gonna say, it's good to have someone behind that knows how to navigate this. 12 years of pain.
Do we have any minutes? But we said three last year, revisions, meaning that it was cancelled in 2020.
Reading the submission, and we're going to ask for a second. Steve.
I'll move.
Thank you. Seconder,
I'll second.
Rebecca, thank you. Have we all read it?
Yep.
Happy? All those in favour?
Aye.
Those against? Carried. Thank you. Well done.
We have a category, but
Hey, on behalf of the Thames councillors, thanks for helping us keep housing at the front of what we need to do.
You're very important, Peter.
And water underground.
Where it belongs.
as long as it stays out of the sky, I'm all good.
Okay.
Could say so. AP.
It'd
Trying to think of the right words.
be a shitty discussion.
I'm just a little bit unclear as to how we address the OPEX.
Target has a plan. Well, we've all been taking a new resolution because we've already resolved the first OPEX resolution. So we'll need to, if we're adding in something, we need to have an additional resolution. But first up, we should probably discuss, the proposal and we do that.
Okay, open for discussion. Who knows the most about the trail project?
Just at a very high level, we've got a request of 100,000 for trail route and construction investigations, consultation and development of a business case for further application to UBIE Tourism Infrastructure Fund or the New Zealand Cycle Trails Funding.
Sorry, the funding application is from who to who?
The question, it's from the advocacy group.
Which is Greg and his team. Yep,
Sounds sweet.
very happy.
Yeah, so I'm not looking at their actual submission, I'm just looking at my
And
synopsis in the room.
Two community board. Water council.
Council.
All right.
Was it?
That was directly to the annual plan consultation.
Okay,
And they presented that.
so that is an application from the advocacy group to council as part of the annual plan consultation. They did them.
We've put it in the out of scope, because it wasn't a piece of funding that we were consulting on in our annual plan, and we weren't looking for new projects. We were just looking at what changed in our existing OPEX and CAPEX budgets. We hadn't included that in there. It would typically be something we normally address through a long-term plan budget cycle. But we do have a submission on it. Council can decide to amend the OPEX budget.
So there was already 50,000 in.
There's been 50,000. Oh, this year?
Half of that's been spent, so there's still 25,000 unspent of that 50. Have I got that right?
Approximately.
I'm not, I think the chair, I'm not sure exactly if that's.
Yeah, it's around that, half of it.
So does anyone know how that 100,000 marries up with the 25,000? Is this for the next stage?
So in the previous long-term plan, there was a $50,000 allocation made for investigating the cycle trail up as far as initially to the swing bridge. And so that 50,000 was put in. A investigation study was commissioned to do that, which if I remember rightly, costs about $25,500 to do that investigation about what would need to be done. Subsequently, the group, following discussions with the Hauraki Rail Trail, following discussions with the district, cycle trail, etc., extended the concept to take the trail all the way up to the Dock Visitor Centre. And we all saw that presentation where it was billed as the most fantastic half-day trail in New Zealand, and what have you. The first we got to see of it was at the submission. Subsequently, the chair board requested that it be presented to the community board. That was done at our last meeting, and the community board realised that this would, their view was that this would be really, really significant for Thames, but to have, for people doing the cycle trail, to have one that would be basically compete with the Waihi, the Parata Waihi one. The suggestion is to have $100,000, which, in talking to the group, the advocacy group, they believe that that's actually in two tranches. The first tranche, which would be about 45% of that, so 45,000 would be actually just doing an overall feasibility study, and then the balance would be, once it was determined by a feasibility study that it would actually work, that then to spend the rest on, on basic design and what have you. So the fact that it's potentially in two tranches, I think we have an option to look at the 100K. I think we have a second option to look at just the first tranche for this annual plan, where they would look at the 45K for a feasibility study. And they base that 45,000 on a study that was done in Manawatu, I think, or can't quite recall where it was.
Fielding, yes.
Fielding, yeah, where there was a feasibility study in Fielding, and they compared the thing and they say, hey, look, this could be done for 45,000.
Thank you. I'm aware that Creative Coromandel have just successfully received some funding for a feasibility study for an arts centre in Mercury Bay. And I can't help but see similarities between the process that they went through, and it brings me back to what Laura was talking about funding for feasibility studies on community projects is available, not necessarily from council. So I would just ask the question, has any of that, and you might not agree, might not be the best person to say, have they explored any alternative funding options for feasibility?
I don't know if they've explored any other funding options, and I certainly don't know if they've explored wherever that funding came from. I don't know.
Yeah, Martin, but we believe that, sorry, Lorna, did you? Yes, they're certainly looking to use that feasibility/business case study to then go out to external funders. They're not saying we want $1.5 million from council to then do the trail.
Thank you.
I might just add, I don't know if you recall that we had that presentation to the councillors about the cycle and walkway strategy, and the Kauranga River Trail are part of that Kauranga collective. And so that's bringing again different groups like the Whangata, Mount Light Park, Coromandel Town. So they are working together, and they have sort of 6 weekly, 8 weekly meetings where they will come together and look about collaborative ways of funding. So I think with the adoption of the strategy and also having that as an option as well, we again can help with looking at funding avenues.
Yeah, it's worked really well, hasn't it? Put those groups together. Fantastic, biking, mountain bike organisation, really fantastic.
So the question on the table for us is are councillors happy to consider, it's $100,000 and it would be OPEX, 45 of that would be a feasibility study. I got the split right? So the question is, are we willing to countenance $100,000 of OpEx on this project at this point? Thoughts?
I can just add my little thoughts. We've got a trail at Palmatar, which we're talking about putting out the mountain bike park. We had $200,000 in OpEx and we've parked that and gone into the long-term plan project process because they felt that was a better avenue for us. We put it back into a major project and get funding again. And then recently we've just done a feasibility study for 101 Lindsay Road and they went out and they actually, as Lorna suggested, went out and found that money outside quite easily. So that was 30,000, I think, dollars that they went, not 45, sorry, so.
So for my tuppence with, I think it's a fantastic project. I was really impressed with what Greg and Debbie presented. That's the sort of initiative we want for this town. I have great reservations about whether it's supportable for us at the time, and I would suggest that there is funding available from alternative sources that they should be exploring before council put their hand up for a feasibility study. That's $1,000 from OpEx. Okay.
Yeah, I totally support that. And I know that what the Mercury Bay Community Board and potentially council did in supporting our arts group and sourcing some external funding was just to write letters of support. And we did that through the board and I think one came from council.
Wonderful.
Yeah, and that was that helped them in going out and looking for funding for that feasibility study.
And there is funding out there. And more of the team could help guide in that direction where to find that funding. But my gut feeling at the moment is that in this particular time, it's not something we want to add to. And the thoughts.
I support you on that one.
So do I.
And not discounting on any level the value of the product. It's
Absolutely.
Matter of timing and.
timing and affordability.
Yeah.
So
Sorry.
that sucks, but I can see where everybody's coming from. Would it be worth, in the show of goodwill to the group who've got a presentation, obviously got a lot of enthusiasm and would like I feel, and correct me if I'm wrong from your point of view, Peter, but I think that they would appreciate an olive leaf, a gesture of goodwill in terms of we like this project and we would like to succeed and we'll work with you. Are we able to put a note in the resolution about the OpEx or something, or write a letter, resolve to write a letter to say that we do support them and we will work with them and that our ED team are supportive of it, and that, just that sort of thing? Can we do that? Because it sounds like everybody would agree to that, and I think that would go a long way in terms of our relationship with them.
From where I sit, I'm very, very happy to do it. Either as mayor or on behalf of council, very happy.
Encourage to put that into LTP for sure, I think.
And support them in looking for that funding elsewhere. Sorry, Delhi, just before I come to you, that 25,000 that's still unspent, could that go towards the feasibility study? Does anyone know the answer to that?
But
Because I'm guessing.
But a resolution around what they can spend it on.
could it be, like if it's not spent? I would imagine it's
Gonna be carried over.
taken for spending this.
Well, it was an
this
OpEx,
much.
so I don't think we can carry over that.
Goes to retain
Go.
earnings,
On it.
and then we lose half.
And then, so because it's OpEx, that you can't carry it forward.
Yeah.
So at the end of the year, it would go into the Thames retained earnings, which would, if there was any over expenditure on the Thames budget, it would be used, washed out with that. Whatever's in retained earnings, there's nothing to stop you from making a resolution if you've got retained earnings to fund that on retained earnings next year.
Yeah. Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
They've got 61.
I think it was 61,000.
25,000 and 61.
This is a community board.
So it's very.
Earnings that comes to mind.
Not that I know.
No,
So,
certainly not after we sign.
sorry, Delhi.
Yeah, I just had a comment to add because I've been part of the creative Coromandel process. And they've wanted me to be part of their steering committee and I've said, no, I will sit there giving you any heads up of what's available to you and supporting you in the process and directing you to the right agencies, which we now have the navigators as well. So it can be useful as a gesture of goodwill, even if it was a Thames Community Board member who went to their meetings and said, like, we're happy to support you in kind, or we think this is very exciting, let's be a part of that and can report back.
And the Thames Community Board, I can confirm, has a liaison person for the river trail.
Nice.
Great, so we don't, sorry, Rick.
Very quickly, and is the 50,000, did that come from the Thames Community Board or from council? Just out of interest.
Yeah, not
Thank you.
community board.
Well,
I realise we almost put this to bed, but 25,000 that's still left over. If we put 20 in, that would make the 45 that Peter was talking about for the feasibility study.
True.
Just putting that in there.
The first thing I've just done, I'd say that I couldn't put my hand on my heart and say it's 25 left, so I think we need to double check that first before we get excited about it. So before we start doing some.
Yeah.
14. I think Dean might have some 14,000.
14.
Dean,
Changing.
oh. Dean had his hand up.
Oh, yeah.
Yep, just confirming it's 14,000 left.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, 20. 31.
Good try,
We'll have district one.
So we don't.
Yes, it will.
Yes.
Okay, so we're gonna move on past that. We don't need a resolution. We haven't decided to do anything.
No, just the support, but
Yes. Got that. We don't need a, we want a resolution for that. I'm happy to do it.
I'd like to have a resolution for that.
Right.
I want to hear what Ari says.
Yeah, no, it's part of me thinks we should do that fresh.
Actually, guided by nice word.
Spreadsheet, the report already notes that we continue to do this.
Okay,
Oh, okay, no, that's good, cool.
and I'll do the commitment to do it. So let me ask you as a council, I'm happy to write a letter as the mayor, but you're happy for me to write a letter on behalf of council?
Absolutely.
Okay. It's 10 to 3. I'm tempted to look at this and say we're close to the end, but I also know that we've got some fairly robust discussions ahead of us in terms of these charges and waste. So if we go over 3 o'clock, we're going to have to pass a resolution to carry on. Got councillors staying here overnight tomorrow. So we need to make a decision now about whether we are going to.
And it can come tomorrow.
And at 3 o'clock and now and come back tomorrow and then finish off then.
How long do you think, then, tomorrow? Have you got any idea?
That depends entirely on you guys as councillors.
Sounds like a morning, hopefully.
I think it's going to be obvious today. But
At this point, is there any additional steer or direction we need to give staff so that they've got time to, work all through the night to update things? I mean, it'd be terrible if there's something they're waiting on and then we don't give them that steer until tomorrow, or you folks all good?
If we, I'm happy to live with the 11.63 that we're currently at. I think as staff, we're happy to come back and continue where we left off if we're not doing any great changes to that.
One measure to raise, so given the fees and charges tomorrow, I think is sort of encapsulated, isn't it? So it's like a net.
Yeah.
It's zero, yeah, okay. So I just wanted to raise just one matter, and that's the stuff Donna talked about earlier, and the financial treatments that we've put in place to keep the rates rise down. Even though that seems like a big number, we are holding it down, which has flow-on implications for next year's session or next year's LTP. So if you just touch on that, John, and this is just for disclosure, full disclosure.
Yeah, so what we've done by using the retained earnings and also not funding that depreciation is we've basically used that for softening the rates for this year. So what that means, I'll explain it, it means artificially, I suppose is the word it's used, artificially lowered the rates this year. However, the expenditure hasn't reduced, so the expenditure is still the same. So the impact means that we will need to be funded.
Can I interrupt you just for a second, because I have a feeling Gary can't hear what you're saying. Gary?
No, I can hear what you're saying. All I was going to ask is, I did send an email to all councillors and the relevant staff's names I could remember. If you wanted to reflect on the general, it's a more general thing I raised. If you want to consider that overnight, it's just some thoughts I had. Okay.
Thank you, Gary. So if you can hear what Donna's saying, we'll go back to Donna, and with apologies for interrupting you, Donna. I just was concerned that Gary couldn't hear.
I'm trying to speak in a big voice.
Yeah.
Hopefully he'll be able to hear me. So basically, the impact is that we've softened the rates this year. The expenditure stayed the same, so the expenditure will still be there in theory next year. And will need to be funded next year. Like we won't have the ability to soften that next year. So, for example, like the retained earnings that we've used this year has probably softened the rates. Hayden, would it be fair to say around 2 to 3%? So
That will click on actually.
So in effect, well, your rate increase is already 2 to 3% next year before we start anything. That's what I'm explaining. And with the non-funding of depreciation, yes, that was 8%. We're hoping that spike is we're going to see it come down. We might not. It might go like that for a bit before it comes down. So there will be some implications. We are going to come right back down to where it was as far as property, as far as the valuations go. It might come down a bit, but it's not going to come right back down to where we were before. So there will be an impact in there on rates next year as well, which will be something that will need to be considered as part of the LTP process.
But that's not quite the same thing as it is the first one. The first one is actually having to bring back those things which will add 2%. The other one is a funding of the reinstatement of items through the depreciation calculations. So, and we've said put it off for this year, but if it stays high for next year, we're just funding whatever would be in the year for next year, not this year.
Not going back to fund what's already happened this year, but next year that will still be there because that depreciation will still carry on. We'll still need to fund it.
And I'm unclear as to why, if we're using retained earnings, we need to kind of refund those next year.
We're not refunding what we've already used, but what I'm saying is, so this year we've taken 3%, so 3% off our rate rise by using retained earnings.
Yep.
So like if you take, when you look at your rates increase next year, your rates increase, you'll be saying will be from whatever the rates increase was this year, and then you'll be for the next financial year, you'll be having an increase there, and that's the difference between what the rate is this year, what the rate is next year. That's your increase. We've artificially kept the rates lower this year by say 3% for the retained earnings. So automatically you're already starting, your starting position is already at 3% before you actually have a rates increase.
It's the reverse of the problem we had the previous year.
We're using retained.
Yes.
So if you can't use it as a revenue source next year, then the rest of that will.
I get that.
So we just think that's really important that that's disclosed. Like you're all sitting here going, goodness, the race thing is giving us 5%. We don't know when it's coming. So I guess what we're telling you now is that what we're doing is going to make it up next year. And Donna and I were also just discussing about whether we should actually put that disclosure in the annual plan, just in terms of setting community expectations. But this is what we've done for you this year, but the impact of that next year is going to be this.
Yeah, I think so.
It's great to start telling that story.
Tell the story.
It does, it tells the story of
Good or bad,
the
tells
things like that.
So, thanks, Steve, and thank you, Bailey. We have now, it's 3 o'clock, we've got 3 more resolutions to go. Challenges, try and knock these over, we'll come back tomorrow.
What are we going to talk, what are we going to talk now? The,
Rates, fees and charges?
yeah, so they're already negative.
We mentioned at the beginning that we would talk through the way.
We'll need to keep
Waste.
and pricing
Yeah.
discussion and to look at the 3 options. And the resolution on that and then the fees and charges.
So I'm going to propose, thanks, Kate, sorry, to interrupt. I'm going to propose that we need to call it quits there and pick this up again tomorrow. Can I just ask how many councillors are staying overnight? The ones that live here can put their hands down.
Oh, no, I'm actually going to go back for a random.
All right.
Thanks. Can't handle one life.
All right, thank you. So, unless there's any.
Yeah.
Right, so let's have a. We're adjourning.
Okay.
That's the end of today. Thank you.
Thank you, Lee. Well,
Thank you, guys.
Happy man.